Okay, thanks for bearing with me for that transition over to part two. We were talking about the Tula in Mexico, the capital of the Toltecs. Um, and we're talking about these colossal Atlantids. These are these anthropomorphized architectural supports that originally held up the temple's roof. And they're really stiff, dignified. They wear these feathered headdresses and have better butterfly pectorals. Their status as warriors is further demonstrated by these atlatls, these spear throwers that they're holding. Um, and this blocky, stiff Toltec sculptural style eventually gives way to this more fluid and naturalistic stone carving technique that's developed by the Aztecs. So this is kind of unique to the Toltec culture. So in the Caribbean, we have the Taino civilization, and it spread its sphere of influence across the islands of Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Dominican Republic. The Taino region consisted of a series of chiefdoms that were led by a cacique, and the Taino are perhaps best known for their famous encounter with Christopher Columbus in 1492. One of the most important genres of material culture among the Taino people are these zemis. They're usually made from stone or wood, and the zemis represented gods and ancestors and were often associated with rituals involving inhalation of cohoba, which is another kind of hallucinogenic substance, kind of like what we saw with the Olmec and other pre-Columbian civilizations. We see this use of hallucinogens as a way of entering into a supernatural world. And the use of these substances was highly regulated and ritualized, and only religious specialists would have had access to these hallucinogens. And sadly, the Taino civilization was almost completely wiped out by the 16th century due to warfare and disease brought on by the Spanish conquest. But their culture retains a lingering presence in the Spanish language. For instance, words like barbacoa or canoa or tabaco would be for barbecue, canoe, and tobacco. And these are all indigenous words that were absorbed into the Spanish vocabulary. And moreover, recently, scientists have discovered that upwards of 60% of modern Puerto Ricans have indigenous mitochondrial DNA. So, along with their artifacts, we get to see some of these lasting impressions of the Taino culture. So next we're going to move on to the Chavin, which were among the earliest civilizations in the central Andes of the Peruvian region. So we'll be taking a look at this map of the Peruvian Andes. That's this really long mountain range going up the west coast of South America, for those of you who aren't familiar. Um, One of the amazing artifacts that we're able to look at from the Chavin culture is the Raimondi stela. And stela, or stele, is a term used to describe this like flat stone that's then carved into, um, usually for monumental purposes. It's currently located at the site of Chavin de Huantar, and it's housed at the Museo Nacional de Arqueología, Antropología y Historia in Lima, Peru. This 7-foot tall granite stela features the Shavin staff god, who is an agricultural deity or agricultural god. And he wears this towering headdress consisting of swirled protrusions and serpents. And this staff god looks up as if to establish a connection with the upper world. And the stela's most remarkable feature is that the figure can be read even if it's upside down. So on the left, you can see the staff god right side up, and on the right, you can see it flipped. It's upside down or inverted. And what originates as an upright earth deity, when it's flipped and turned upside down, it's transformed to a hovering celestial figure with this elongated tongue that's supposed to unfold like a Jacob's ladder, if you've ever seen that toy. If you haven't, look it up. They're very fun to play with. But yeah, it's kind of this strange cosmic unfolding that we're looking at here. So moving on from the Chavin to the Paracas culture of Peru, we see them located in the southern coast of Peru, and they produce some of the most intricate embroidered cloths in pre-Columbian America. The notoriously dry desert environment of the Paracas Peninsula helped to preserve 429 mummy bundles, making it the richest burial ground in the world. The item we're looking at right here, the embroidered funerary mantle, consists of a black background cloth, almost entirely covered with embroidered designs of dancing or possibly flying figures set against this red background. And this mantle would have been originally wrapped around the body of the deceased and buried in an underground funerary chamber. Scholars have debated whether the figures represent shamans in a trance state or ritually sacrificed individuals with disarticulated heads. The remarkable preservation of the Paracas textiles, while undoubtedly facilitated by the excessively dry conditions of Peru's southern desert coast, also speaks to the great care that was taken in the crafting of high quality and precious cloth. And we'll be seeing in the other modules the way that funerary cloth is this important ritual, as we also saw in Asian cultures and Asian art as well. So the fibers that were used in the creation of the Paracas mantles came from locally sourced cotton as well as these animal fibers that came from the llama, the alpaca, and the vicuña. And those were imported from the highlands to the east. And the Paracas textiles also clue us into the importance of funerary rites and ancestor worship in the Andes, which extends well into the present day among Andean indigenous communities. The great care afforded to the preparation of the deceased body for the afterlife reflected the belief that death merely signified one step in a much longer journey from the world of the living into the world of the supernatural. So the next Andean art from pre-Columbian Peru is the Nazca lines. This particular one is of a hummingbird, and this is one of the most well-known examples of pre-Columbian art. For a long time, it was considered to be the work of aliens. Archaeologists have put this theory to rest. It's kind of insanely patriarchal and racist thought to just determine that people were incapable of making such a like tremendous feat of planning and studying geography and mapping and the stars and the sun. So it's kind of like a painful reminder of the way that we have undermined the abilities of Indigenous artists. But there are um, there are still some pseudo-archaeologists like Eric von Däniken who will still suggest that these are made from aliens, but that's really up to you to believe or not believe. But it's probably historically inaccurate and insensitive to suggest. But to kind of discuss the aesthetics of this piece, these lines consist of about a dozen figural representations, including a hummingbird. There's another one of a monkey, a snake, and a dolphin. The vast majority of the lines, however, are straight lines that run parallel, converge, and intersect across the Nazca Pampas plains. These lines are thought to trace the direction of underground water sources, and the figural geoglyphs became important sites of pilgrimages. And so for any of you who are thinking about pilgrimages down to Southern America, this could be incorporated into that. Okay, next we talk about the Moche culture, which is located about 500 miles north of the Paracas Peninsula. They settled along a series of river valleys between the modern-day coastal cities of Trujillo and Piura, Peru. The Moche were the first state-level society in the Andes. It was headed by a regional lord. They were large adobe huacas, or pyramids, that dot the desert landscape, many of which were painted really brightly in antiquity. One of the hallmarks of every Moche site are the hundreds of mold-made ceramic pots deposited in the graves of elite individuals. And this one featured here, the Moche portrait pot, depicts a high-status male with a bird headdress. The round handle on the back of his head doubles as a spout, indicating that the pot would have been used for storing liquids to provide sustenance to the deceased in the afterlife. The naturalism of this Moche portrait pot vessel is unsurpassed in the pre-Columbian Americas. The Moche exhibited a keen interest in emphasizing the specific likeness of their elite, and usually male, individuals. The slightly pursed lips, the high cheekbones, and the furrowed brow all served to give the portrait a lifelike quality. And these pots tended to be painted in either neutral earth tones, and they used a slip technique to do that. And the last piece we will cover is the Gate of the Sun, which is part of the Tiwanaku culture, located in this southern Andes where it straddles the border of Peru and Bolivia, located along the shores of Lake Titicaca. And this whole area is known as the Altiplano, or plateau region, where people made their living herding llamas and fishing. Like the Toltec relationship to the Aztecs, the Tiwanaku peoples were celebrated and emulated by the Inca, who traced their imperial origin story to the islands of the sun and moon on Lake Titicaca. The site of the Tiwanaku contains a number of architectural complexes, including the Acapana, the Pumapunku, and the Sunken Courtyard. But perhaps the most emblematic feature of the site is this gateway to the sun. It's a monolithic doorway that may have been one of the many doorways marking the entrance to one of the buildings. It features a low relief carving. Oh,